I don't even know where to begin with this fucking nightmare. I'm still shaking as I type this. 2 weeks ago, a fancy envelope arrived at my apartment. The return address was my parents' house, which was weird because we barely speak anymore. Inside was an invitation to my mom's 50th birthday party. Expensive cardstock, gold foil, the works. But at the bottom, written in blood red ink, everyone welcome except Blake, the family disappointment. At first I thought it was some sick joke. Who does that? I called my mom immediately. When she picked up, I could hear party planning happening in the background. My sister Eleanor laughing. Dad talking to someone. I asked Mom if she seriously sent me an invitation just to tell me I wasn't invited. She laughed. Not just a chuckle, a full-on cackle. She told me, did I really think I'd be invited after everything? That I was dead to them? Before I could respond, my dad grabbed the phone and said I wasn't his son. Haven't been for years, and I should stop embarrassing the family by existing. Then my sister got on, yelling about how even homeless people were more successful than me. Mom took the phone back, asking why I was even calling since I was nobody to them. I sat there in complete shock. I knew our relationship was bad, but this was next-level cruelty. For context, I come from a prestigious family that owns a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states. My great-grandfather started it. My grandfather expanded it. My father runs it now. The sacred family legacy. Every male in our family has worked there since forever, except me. From childhood, it was drilled into me that I would someday take over. But I was always the creative kid drawing in my sketchbooks, while my brother Ross was the one obsessed with cars. When I was 18, I told him I wanted to study animation instead of business. You'd think I'd announced I was becoming a drug dealer. Dad exploded. Said I was throwing away generations of hard work. Mom cried for days, telling everyone I was breaking her heart. My siblings turned on me completely. I went to art school anyway. They cut me off financially halfway through my 2nd semester, forcing me to drop out. I couch surfed, worked 3 jobs, taught myself advanced animation at night, built a portfolio while exhausted. Meanwhile, they were telling our entire community I was a drug addict living on the streets. Completely false. Eventually, I got an entry-level job at a small animation studio. Worked my way up over years while my family continued to act like I was human garbage. At every holiday, I was either uninvited or invited just to be mocked. They'd ask, how's the cartoon business? Made any real money yet? Meanwhile, my brother who joined the business was the golden child. My sister married the son of another car dealer family. Perfect alliance. The worst part? I've actually become successful. My animation studio has won awards. We've worked on projects for major streaming platforms, but they refuse to acknowledge it because it's not cars. 2 years ago at Christmas, I tried one last time to reconnect. I brought my portfolio and a USB with our studio's demo reel to show them what I'd accomplished. Mom wouldn't even look at it. Dad walked out of the room. Ross laughed and said doodling cartoons wasn't a real job. Eleanor asked if I was still playing with my little drawings instead of doing something meaningful with my life. I left before dinner was even served, deleted their numbers, and blocked them on everything. So why did they send me this anti-invitation? Pure cruelty. They knew exactly what they were doing, reminding me that I'm the family outcast. The thing is, I would have ignored it if they hadn't called me. But that phone call? That pushed me over the edge. After hanging up, I paced around my apartment for hours, raging. Then, I noticed something on the invitation. A QR code, linking to a private Facebook event. I scanned it and saw they were planning to live stream the entire party for friends and extended family who couldn't attend. That's when I decided, enough is enough. See, what my family doesn't know is that while they've been busy disowning me and pretending I'm a failure, I've been quietly building something. Not just my career, something else. Something that would finally make them understand who they've been messing with all these years. I spent the next week putting together a plan. I called in favors, gathered documents, prepared everything meticulously. I hired a courier service for a special delivery that would arrive during the party. 2 envelopes, one black, one white. The day of the party arrived. I sat alone in my apartment, opened my laptop, and watched the stream start. Everyone was dressed in designer clothes, champagne flowing, all fake smiles and air kisses. Then came the speeches. Mom talked about being blessed with 2 real children who actually matter. Sister said she was so glad they were Mom's only kids. Brother thanked Mom for teaching them the value of family. Then Mom raised her glass and said she did birth 3, but they had to cut out the cancer. Everyone laughed. Someone asked whatever happened to that other son? Mom said, what son? I only have 2. My uncle asked about the failure? Mom said, oh, that thing. It died to us years ago. More laughter. My cousin Lucy gave a speech remembering when he thought he'd amount to something. What a joke. Dad called me the biggest disappointment of his life. I was literally having trouble breathing watching this. But the grand finale was yet to come. Mom stood up, clearly drunk, and announced that today, as her birthday gift to herself, she was officially removing me from the will, the family tree, everything. They had a ceremony where they crossed my name off the fancy family tree they display in their house. Everyone cheered. What they didn't know, while they were busy disowning me publicly, I had already put my plan into motion. At exactly 8 p.m., my courier arrived at their door. 2 envelopes, one black, one white. I watched on the live stream as Mom opened them, her face transforming from triumph to absolute horror. Dad dropped his champagne glass. Sister screamed. Brother's phone hit the floor. The stream suddenly cut off. That night, my phone exploded with 60-plus missed calls, voicemails of pure terror, texts begging me to call back. What was in those envelopes? That's for the next update. But let's just say they had no idea who they were fucking with all these years. Update 1. First, thanks for all the support on my last post. I honestly didn't expect that many people to care about my family drama, but reading your comments made me feel less crazy for being so pissed off. So many of you asked what was in those envelopes, and I promised I'd explain. But first, let me tell you about watching that goddamn live stream, because it was even worse than I thought it would be. I took the day off work and just sat in my apartment waiting for the Facebook Live notification. I ordered takeout, cracked open a beer, and tried to prepare myself mentally for whatever bullshit my family would say about me. The stream was scheduled to start at 6, but it didn't actually begin until like 6:30, typical for my always fashionably late mother. When it finally started, the camera was set up in their living room, that massive room with the pretentious chandelier and the family wall, where they hang all those formal portraits of Wilson family members going back generations. My portrait used to hang there too, until I chose animation over cars. Everyone was already drinking champagne and mingling. Dad was showing off his new Rolex to some business associates. Mom was in this sparkly gold dress looking exactly like the country club trophy wife she's always wanted to be. My sister Eleanor was hanging on her husband like a prop. She married the son of another car dealer family 3 years ago, in what was basically a business merger disguised as a wedding. And Ross, my brother, was doing what he always does, loudly talking about sales numbers to anyone who would listen. I recognized most of the guests. Family friends, business partners, cousins, uncles, aunts. People who've known me since I was a kid. People who used to ask about my drawings and tell me I was talented. Now they were all there celebrating with the family that erased me. The first hour was just typical party stuff. Boring small talk, fake laughing, people taking selfies. I almost turned it off. Then my dad clinked his glass and the speeches started. Dad went first with this whole speech about family legacy and tradition, how proud he was of what they'd built, how Wilson Motors wasn't just a business but a dynasty. He actually said, "Some people understand what it means to be part of something bigger than themselves. Others?" And then he just trailed off, shaking his head. Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Then Ross got up and talked about how he was born ready to join the family business, how he'd never even considered doing anything else because some of us understand loyalty. He thanked Dad for teaching us what real success looks like while looking directly at the camera, like he knew I might be watching. Eleanor's speech was about how marrying into another car dealer family had strengthened the bloodline. She literally said that, like we're fucking royalty or something. She thanked Mom for teaching us to cut out toxic influences and said she was glad her kids would grow up with proper role models, not disappointments. The whole time I was taking screenshots, saving the video, making sure I had records of everything they were saying about me. Not because I needed it for my plan, that was already in motion, but because I wanted to remember exactly why they deserved what was coming. Then Mom got up for her big speech. She was pretty drunk by this point, slurring some words. She started by thanking everyone for coming to celebrate this milestone with my real family. Then she said she was blessed with 2 children who actually matter. My sister yelled from the crowd that she was glad they were Mom's only kids. Everyone laughed. Mom raised her glass and said, "I did birth 3, but we had to cut out the cancer." The whole room erupted in laughter and applause. Some fucking family friend I've known since I was 10 years old yelled, "Whatever happened to that other son?" Mom looked straight at the camera and said, "What son? I only have 2. My uncle, Dad's brother, called out the failure. And Mom said, "Oh, that thing. It died to us years ago." More laughter. Then my cousin Lucy got up to give a toast. She's 2 years older than me, and we used to be close as kids. She stood there with her champagne and asked if everyone remembered when I thought I'd amount to something. Said it was the biggest joke in family history. People were practically crying with laughter. But the worst part was still coming. Mom stood up again, wobbling a little, and announced that as her birthday gift to herself, she was officially removing me from the will, the family tree, everything. They had this whole fucking ceremony planned. Dad brought out the framed family tree that hangs in their study. This fancy calligraphy thing on expensive paper that traces our family back like 5 generations. Mom took a red marker and dramatically crossed out my name while everyone cheered. Then she took my portrait off the wall behind them. I didn't even know they still had it, and dropped it into a trash can they'd placed there specifically for this moment. I was shaking with rage at this point, but I just kept watching, checking the time every few minutes. The courier was scheduled for 8 p.m. exactly. It was 7:45. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while they'd been busy pretending I was a failure, I'd been building something big. Really big. Remember how I said I worked my way up at an animation studio? What I didn't mention is that 3 years ago, I bought it, then expanded it, then acquired 2 more studios. We've produced content for 3 major streaming platforms, won an industry award last year. I've made more money in the past 2 years than my brother's dealership makes in 5. But there's more. About 4 years ago, I started hearing rumors that Wilson Motors wasn't doing as well as they pretended. They'd expanded too quickly, taken on too much debt. Dad made some bad investments. They were keeping up appearances, but the business was struggling. So I started quietly buying up their debt through a holding company, a lot of their debt. I spent 2 years acquiring every loan, every financial obligation I could get my hands on. It took almost all my savings and profits, but eventually, I owned enough to control their fate. They had no idea. They thought I was still that struggling artist they kicked out. They had no clue that while they were mocking me at parties, I was becoming their biggest creditor. 8 p.m. was approaching. On screen, Mom was cutting her birthday cake, shaped like a luxury car, of course. Everyone was singing. Dad had his arm around her, looking so smug and self-satisfied. Then the doorbell rang. Mom looked annoyed at the interruption. Their housekeeper answered it, then brought in the 2 envelopes on a silver tray. "Special delivery for Mrs. Wilson," she said. Mom looked confused, but took them. "Who would send something during my party?" she asked, like it was such an inconvenience. One envelope was black, the other white. She opened the white one first. Inside was a birthday card. The room got quiet as she read it aloud. "Happy 50th birthday to the woman who gave me life," then decided I didn't deserve to be part of hers. "From your erased son, Blake." She looked up, startled, scanning the room like she thought I might be hiding somewhere. Dad grabbed the card from her hand, read it, then crumpled it up. Then she opened the black envelope. I could see her hands shaking as she pulled out the documents inside. Legal papers, financial statements, loan documents with my holding company's name on them. A letter from my lawyer explaining exactly what I now owned and what that meant for Wilson Motors. Her face went from confusion to shock to horror in about 3 seconds. Dad looked over her shoulder, and I swear to God his face turned gray. He dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor. Eleanor rushed over asking what was wrong. Mom handed her the papers. My sister screamed, like actually screamed, and her phone fell from her hand. Ross grabbed the documents next, started flipping through them frantically, muttering, "This can't be legal," over and over. Then Mom looked directly at the camera, finally realizing I was watching. Her face contorted with rage. She lunged toward the camera, screaming that I was dead to them, that I'd regret this, that I was destroying the family. The live stream cut off abruptly. Someone must have knocked over the phone or shut it down. Within minutes, my phone started blowing up. First text was from Ross. "What the fuck did you do?" Then Eleanor. "You can't do this to us." Then calls from Mom, Dad, uncles, aunts, family friends. 63 missed calls in total by morning. 28 voicemails ranging from threats to pleading to hysterical crying. I didn't answer a single one. What exactly did those documents say? That I now control over 70% of their business debt. That all their loan payments now come to me. That I can call in those loans at any time. That the fate of Wilson Motors, their precious family legacy, is entirely in my hands. I went to bed that night and slept better than I have in years. The next morning, I woke up to 100 more notifications. Apparently, Dad showed up at my apartment building at 6 a.m., but security wouldn't let him up because he's not on my approved visitor list. He caused such a scene they almost called the cops. This is just the beginning. I have more planned. We'll update again soon. Update 2. Holy shit, these past 3 days have been absolute chaos. I'm typing this at like 2 a.m. because I can't sleep with everything that's happened. My phone battery died twice yesterday from all the notifications. So after the live stream cut off, I turned off my phone and went to bed. Woke up the next morning to 100 plus missed calls, like I mentioned before. What I didn't mention was the content of some of those voicemails. Dad left 15 messages that started with threats and gradually turned into desperate pleading. The last one was just him breathing heavily like he was having a panic attack. Mom left 20-something messages. The first few were just her screaming, literally screaming, that I was dead to them, that I'd regret this, that I was destroying the family. By message 10, she was crying, saying there must be some misunderstanding. By message 20, she was talking about how we could work something out as a family and how she always believed in my potential. Complete bullshit. I ignored all of it and went to work. My assistant told me someone from Wilson Motors had been calling the office every 15 minutes since we opened. I told her to block all their numbers. Around noon, Eleanor showed up at my office. Security called up asking if I wanted to let her in. I was honestly curious what she'd say, so I said yes. She walked in wearing designer everything, looking like she hadn't slept. No makeup, hair a mess. Totally unlike her. She tried to hug me, which was fucking rich considering she was one of the people laughing about cutting out the cancer less than 24 hours earlier. I stepped back and just stared at her. She started crying immediately, saying they were just joking at the party, that they didn't really mean any of it, that they've always loved me. I pulled out my phone and played the video clip of her, saying she was glad Mom only had 2 kids. Her face went white. Then she switched tactics. Started telling me how Ross and Dad were falling apart, how Mom hadn't stopped crying, how this would kill our parents. I asked her why she thought I would care about the feelings of people who publicly humiliated me and threw my picture in the trash. She had no answer. Then came the real reason for her visit. She asked what I wanted. Money, public apology, position in the family business. She actually said they'd find something suitable for me, if that's what it would take. I laughed in her face. I told her I didn't want anything from them. I had everything I needed. I just wanted them to understand what it felt like to have your life controlled by someone who doesn't care about you. She started crying again, harder this time. As she was leaving, she said something that actually surprised me. She admitted Dad had been lying about the business for years. They were much deeper in debt than even I realized. If I called in the loans, they'd lose everything. The dealerships, the houses, the cars, everything. They'd be ruined. I just said, sounds like a family problem, and had security escort her out. That night, Ross called from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up without checking caller ID, which was my mistake. As soon as I realized it was him, I was about to hang up, but what he said stopped me. He was at a bar, clearly wasted, and he apologized. Not for the party, he didn't mention that at all, but for something that happened years ago. When I was trying to get my animation career started, I had applied for a small business grant that would have helped me launch my own studio earlier. I was a finalist, but then suddenly got rejected with no explanation. Ross admitted that Dad had called in a favor and tanked my application. They were worried I might actually succeed on my own and make them look bad. This was the first I'd heard about this, but honestly, it didn't even surprise me. I hung up without saying anything. That night I dug through some old emails and found the rejection letter from that grant committee. 4 years of my life I spent struggling, taking shit jobs, barely making rent, all because they deliberately sabotaged me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The next morning, I had a meeting with my lawyer to discuss next steps. She advised me that legally, I could give Wilson Motors 30 days to pay back the loans in full, which they obviously couldn't do. After that, I could start proceedings to take over their assets. While I was in this meeting, the receptionist buzzed to say my cousin Lucy was in the lobby. Lucy, who had publicly mocked me at the party. I told them to send her away. 10 minutes later, my uncle called. I declined. Then my aunt declined. Then 3 family friends all declined. They were tag-teaming me, trying to get anyone through to me. By lunchtime, my office phone was ringing non-stop. I had my assistant forward all calls to voicemail. I ordered food delivery because I didn't want to leave the building and risk running into more family members. Then around 3 p.m., the receptionist called in a panic. My dad had shown up with Ross, and they were causing a scene in the lobby. Dad was yelling that he needed to see his son, that it was a family emergency. Ross was trying to calm him down while simultaneously trying to convince the security guard to let them up. I told security not to let them through under any circumstances. I wasn't ready to face my dad yet, not after what Ross had told me about the grant. But Dad wouldn't leave. He sat down in the lobby and announced he would stay there until I came down. An hour passed, then 2. I was essentially trapped in my own office. Finally, I decided to end this standoff. I texted my assistant to call an Uber to the back entrance of the building. I snuck out that way and went home, leaving Dad sitting in the lobby for another 3 hours before security finally forced him to leave when the building closed. That night, I received an email from Eleanor with urgent family situation in the subject line. The email itself just said, Please check your mail tomorrow. It's important. Sure enough, the next morning a courier delivered a thick envelope to my apartment. Inside was a stack of financial documents, the complete books for Wilson Motors for the past 5 years. And holy shit, they were in way worse shape than I thought. They hadn't just taken on too much debt. They'd been cooking the books, moving money around to hide losses, taking out new loans to pay off old ones. It was a house of cards that was about to collapse even before I bought their debt. There was also a handwritten note from Eleanor explaining that Dad had been hiding this from everyone, even Mom. She only found out the truth after my stunt at the party forced Dad to come clean. She claimed she was sending me this information so I would understand the full impact of what I was doing to the family. I think she expected this to make me feel guilty or responsible for their situation. Instead, it just confirmed that I'd made the right move. They had built their precious family legacy on lies. I was still processing all this when my building's security called to say my father was downstairs again, demanding to be let up. This time, I told them to send him up. It was time to face him. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. Dad had always been this larger-than-life figure, perfectly dressed, perfectly groomed, radiating confidence and authority. The man standing in my hallway looked 10 years older overnight. Rumpled suit, bloodshot eyes, gray stubble. He didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me into the apartment, started pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. Then he turned and really looked at my place for the first time. The expensive furniture, the original artwork, the view of the city. I could see him reassessing me in real time. He asked where I got the money to buy their debt. I told him about my animation studio, the acquisitions, the awards, the contracts with streaming platforms. With each detail, his face got darker. Then he asked why. Why would I do this to my own family? Was it all just about revenge? I pulled out my phone and played the video from the party. Made him watch himself laughing as Mom crossed my name off the family tree. Made him watch as they threw my portrait in the trash. Made him listen to his own voice calling me the biggest disappointment of his life. He looked away. Couldn't watch it. Said they were just drunk, blowing off steam. Said I was taking it all too seriously, then tried to flip it around on me. Said my stunt with the envelopes proved I was just as vindictive and cruel as they were. I lost it then. Told him about what Ross had confessed, how they deliberately tanked my grant application. Asked him how many other times they'd sabotaged me over the years that I didn't even know about. He didn't deny it. Just said they were trying to protect me from failure, that the animation thing was just a phase I needed to get out of my system. I laughed at that. Asked him if he still thought animation was just a phase now that I was successful enough to buy out his failing business. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Then came the real reason for his visit. He asked what it would take to make this go away. He offered to step down as CEO and let me take over Wilson Motors. Said I could run it however I wanted. Said he'd publicly apologize at a family gathering. Said he'd make Mom and my siblings apologize too. I told him I didn't want their fucking business. I had my own. I didn't want their apologies either. They'd only be saying sorry because they got caught, not because they actually regretted how they treated me. He started getting angry then. Said I was being childish. Said this wasn't a game. Said people's livelihoods were at stake. Not just our family, but all their employees. Said I needed to be a man and find a solution. I told him I already had a solution. I was going to call in the loans in 30 days, as was my legal right. What happened after that was up to them. He completely lost it. Started yelling that I couldn't do this, that it would destroy everything they'd built. Then he grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard. I shoved him off and told him to get the fuck out of my apartment. For a second, I thought he might hit me. He raised his hand, face contorted with rage. Then something changed in his expression. His hand dropped. He looked defeated. On his way out, he turned back and said something I can't stop thinking about. He said, "You think you're nothing like me, but this proves you're my son after all." I slammed the door in his face. That was yesterday. Today has been quieter, which makes me think they're planning something. Eleanor texted asking for a meeting with the whole family, neutral location, public place. Said they have a proposal for me. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to ignore them completely and just proceed with calling in the loans. But another part is curious what they could possibly offer. At this point, one thing's for sure. I'm not backing down. They spent years making me feel worthless. Now they get to see exactly what I'm worth. We'll update when I decide what to do about their meeting request. Final update. So I agreed to the family meeting. Against my better judgment, TBH. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what kind of proposal they could possibly offer after everything that's happened. We met at this upscale restaurant downtown, the kind with private dining rooms where rich people have business meetings. I showed up 15 minutes late on purpose. When I walked in, they were all already there. Mom, Dad, Eleanor, Ross, and, surprisingly, Uncle Jim. Dad's brother, who called me the failure at the party. The first thing I noticed was how terrible they all looked. Dad hadn't shaved. Mom's roots were showing, which has literally never happened in my lifetime. Eleanor's designer outfit was wrinkled. Ross's eyes were bloodshot. They all stared at me like I was a ghost as I sat down. Before anyone could speak, I pulled out my phone, hit record, and set it on the table. Dad started to object, but Mom put her hand on his arm to stop him. That was my first clue that this meeting was her idea. It was awkward AF for like a full minute. Nobody seemed to know how to start. Finally, Mom spoke up. She had this weird, fake, cheerful voice, the same one she uses at country club events when she's trying to impress people. She started by saying how wonderful it was to see me, how successful I looked, how proud they all were of what I'd accomplished. I just stared at her, didn't say a word, let the silence get uncomfortable. She kept going, stumbling more with each sentence. Said there had been a misunderstanding at the party, that they'd been blowing off steam and didn't mean any of it, that they'd always valued me as part of the family. I pulled out my tablet and played the video clip of her crossing my name off the family tree and dropping my portrait in the trash. Asked her to explain what part of that was a misunderstanding. She started crying. Not like normal crying, these weird, hiccuping sobs that seemed to catch her by surprise. Dad put his arm around her and glared at me like I was the villain here. That's when Eleanor jumped in. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside was their proposal, a formal offer to give me 20% ownership in Wilson Motors, a seat on the board, and a public apology if I'd agree not to call in the loans. I laughed, not a little chuckle, a full-on laugh that made people at nearby tables turn and look. 20%? After what they did? After what I now owned? I told them I already controlled 70% of their debt, which effectively meant I owned the company anyway. Why would I settle for 20%? Ross got angry then, started saying I was being unreasonable, that I was destroying our family out of spite, that people would lose their jobs. I reminded him that the business was already failing because of Dad's mismanagement before I got involved. That's when Uncle Jim spoke up. And holy shit, what he said changed everything. Apparently, Wilson Motors wasn't started by my great-grandfather like the family legend claimed. It was started by my great-grandfather and his brother, Jim's father. But my great-grandfather forced his brother out in the 1960s, stole his share, and rewrote the company history. The Wilson family legacy was built on betrayal from the very beginning. Dad looked like he wanted to strangle Uncle Jim, started saying it was ancient history, that it had nothing to do with our current situation. Uncle Jim disagreed, said the same pattern of betrayal had continued for generations, said Dad had done similar things to business partners over the years. Then the bomb dropped. Uncle Jim looked me in the eye and said he had proof that Dad and Ross had been actively sabotaging my animation career for years. Not just the grant thing Ross had drunkenly confessed. They'd called studios I'd applied to, spread rumors about me having drug problems, even threatened to pull their advertising from a streaming platform that was considering one of my projects. Dad exploded, called Uncle Jim a traitor, said he was making it all up to turn me against them. But the look on Ross's face told me it was true. He couldn't even meet my eyes. Mom started crying harder. Eleanor was texting frantically under the table, probably updating her husband about how badly this was going. The waiter came by to take our order and backed away slowly when he sensed the tension. I asked Uncle Jim why he was telling me this now, after participating in my public humiliation at the party. He said he'd been bitter for years about what happened to his father, but was too cowardly to stand up to Dad. Seeing how they treated me, and then seeing me fight back, had finally given him the courage to speak up. Dad called him pathetic, said he'd regret this betrayal. Uncle Jim just shrugged and said he had nothing left to lose. Apparently, Dad had been pushing him out of his small share of the business for years. I sat there taking it all in. My family hadn't just rejected me for choosing a different path. They'd actively worked to make me fail so they could say, "I told you so," all while pretending to be this perfect, successful family to the outside world. I stood up to leave. Mom grabbed my arm, mascara running down her face, and asked what I was going to do. Was I really going to destroy them? What about family? I looked at each of them. Dad, still angry but with fear in his eyes. Ross, unable to look at me. Eleanor, calculating her next move. Mom, desperate and crying. I told them I'd made my decision. I was calling in the loans in 30 days as planned. Wilson Motors would be liquidated to cover the debt. Dad slammed his fist on the table. Said I couldn't do this. Said it would kill Mom. Said he'd fight me in court. I reminded him that everything I'd done was completely legal. They had signed those loan documents. They had taken on that debt. All I'd done was buy it, which anyone could have done if they'd looked into the company's finances. Then I laid out my terms. Dad and Ross would resign from Wilson Motors immediately. They would sign over their ownership shares to me. They would make a public statement admitting to financial mismanagement. In return, I wouldn't call in the loans. I'd restructure the business, save the jobs, and preserve what could be saved. Mom looked hopeful for a second, asked if this meant I was coming back to the family, if we could all move forward together. I laughed again, told her I wasn't doing this to rejoin the family. I was doing it because, unlike them, I actually cared about the employees who would lose their jobs. Once the business was stabilized, I planned to sell it to a management group led by Uncle Jim and some of the long-term employees who actually knew how to run it properly. As for our family relationship, that was over. The moment they threw my portrait in the trash and crossed my name off the family tree, they made their choice. I was just honoring their decision. Eleanor started crying then, asked if I was really going to hold a drunken party against them forever. I told her it wasn't about the party. It was about the years of rejection, the deliberate sabotage, the constant belittling. The party was just the final straw. I left them sitting there and went home. 20 minutes later, my phone started blowing up with texts from each of them. Dad, threatening legal action, saying I'd regret this, that no judge would allow a son to steal his father's business. Mom, begging me to reconsider, saying she'd always loved me in her way, that she didn't know about the sabotage, that she'd make it up to me. Eleanor, first angry, then pleading, worried about her lifestyle and social standing when word got out. Ross, just one text. I fucked up, I know that now. I ignored them all and called my lawyer, set everything in motion. The next day, Dad tried one last desperate move. He called a family friend who's a local news reporter, trying to spin a story about an ungrateful son destroying a family business out of spite. The reporter actually called me for comment. I sent him the video of the birthday party, the documents showing their financial mismanagement, and Uncle Jim's statement about the years of sabotage. The story never ran. 2 days later, Dad and Ross resigned. They signed the paperwork transferring their shares. The family attorney delivered the documents to my office himself, looking shell-shocked. That afternoon, I got a text from Uncle Jim with a photo attached. He'd gone to my parents' house to discuss transition details and found Mom taking down the family tree from the wall, the one where they'd crossed out my name. In the photo, the frame was smashed on the floor. It's been a week now. The restructuring is underway. I've been working with accountants to untangle the financial mess Dad created. It's worse than I thought. He'd been taking money out of the business for years to maintain their lavish lifestyle while the company slowly sank. I haven't spoken to any of them since the restaurant. Mom keeps sending these long, rambling texts about family and forgiveness. I've blocked her number 3 times, but she keeps getting new phones. Yesterday, I drove past their house, the massive mansion I grew up in. There was a for sale sign in the yard. Turns out they can't afford it anymore without Dad's inflated salary from the business. Someone asked me in the comments of my last post if revenge feels as good as I thought it would. Honestly, yes and no. Yes, because they finally faced consequences for how they treated me. They finally had to admit their perfect family and successful business were both built on lies. No, because I realized I wasted years of my life seeking their approval and then their punishment. They were never worth it. They aren't evil masterminds, just shallow, insecure people who valued appearances over actual human connections. Uncle Jim came by my office yesterday, thanked me for giving him and the employees a chance to save the business, asked if I might consider being part of the company after all, not in sales or management, but maybe designing their marketing and branding with my animation skills. I told him I'd think about it, not because I want anything to do with cars or the family business, but because it would be the ultimate irony, using the creative skills my family rejected to help rebuild what they destroyed. As for my parents and siblings, I don't hate them anymore. I just don't care. They're not worth the emotional energy. I'm focused on my own life, my own success, my own future. The family tree they crossed my name from, I had it recreated. An exact replica, but without my name on it at all. I'm having it delivered to their new, much smaller house next week. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's showing them they never mattered to you as much as you mattered to them.